So wait a minute, and welcome to the first of 4 videos on OCR's verse literature on Aeneid 6. Okay, so I'm going to try and condense the background down as quick as I can. Virgil is our author. He's one of the most important poets in history. He publishes the Eclogues, the Georgics, and, most importantly for us, the Aeneid. The Aeneid is the story of Aeneas, a prince of Troy who sails to Italy with survivors of the Trojan War and whose bloodline founds Rome. His bloodline includes Romulus and Remus, but also the Julian family, i.e. Julius Caesar and Emperor Augustus. Virgil, for debatable reasons, is writing effectively here a national epic for Rome, and one that heavily glorifies Aeneas, although there is some debate as to exactly how heavily it glorifies Aeneas. I haven't really got time to go into it all now because it's just not going to be relevant yet. I've got a couple of videos down the bottom I would recommend if you want to have more of an explanation as to what's going on. Instead, let's get straight on. Tiny bit of backstory, which I'll explain more as we go. Aeneas, our hero, is trying to get into Hades, the literal underworld, in order to ask his dead father Anchises for advice. He's just got to the shores of the Acheron, which he needs to cross in order to get into Hades proper. So, from here, the via, the road, quae fert, which leads ad undas to the waters of Tartarei Acheron, of the Tartarean Acheron. Tartarean here just means of the underworld, as opposed to specifically of Tartarus. Here, the Gurges, the whirlpool, turbidus, thick, with kaino, with mud, aistoat, boils, in its vastaque waragine, in its vast abyss, or its vast depth. And it eructat, and it vomits up, omnem harenem, all its sand in the Cocytus, another underworld river. Couple of things. A, this is verse literature, so it's a little bit more complicated in terms of slightly more unusual vocabulary than you will have seen in the prose literature. It's also going to be more full of stylistic features because it is poetry, and therefore the reader needs to really have a vivid imagination of the underworld that's going on here. We can also use enjambment, so this word aistoat here, for example, would work. So, as I say, in book 6 of this 12-book story, Aeneas has actually got all the way to Italy, and he is being guided by an Italian oracle called the Sibyl. He's trying to get into Hades by crossing a river, specifically the river Acheron. Now, Hades is kind of hard in that no one ever really defined exactly what it is in mythology. However, we can have a few different vague ideas. The asphodel meadows, which is just boring. The Elysian fields, which Aeneas is trying to get into because that's where his dad is, which is paradise basically, and the fields of punishment, which is kind of for very bad people. We also have Tartarus, which is not part of Hades itself. It is a long way below that, and it's a prison. Another important part of the Hades is that it has a few specific rivers. We have the river Styx, the river Acheron, the river Lethe, the river Cocytus, and the river that I can't pronounce. We've got a lovely depiction here of the kind of journey that Aeneas has. He gets down and he's now trying to cross this sort of vague lake/river. It's not entirely clear. He uses both words kind of interchangeably. He is going to go all the way to meet his father, Anchises, up here, near to the river Lethe in the Elysian fields. So we kind of map what's going on, but it's kind of difficult to see exactly how it all fits together. Virgil continues with his real descriptive writing with a horrendous portitor, a horrendous ferryman, carrier, servat, watches over or keeps has aquas et flumina, these waters and rivers, possibly tautology that. Charon, in his terribile squalore, in his terrible foulness. Obviously we get the word squalor from that in English. This one's slightly complicated in terms of translation. Qui, on whose mento chin yacet lies, Plurima inculta I have translated as a great rough mass of Canetia's white hairs. It's not quite a literal translation, but it's very much evocative of it. Flamma, flames, stant, glow, literally stand, but glow in his lumina, in his eyes. A sordidus, filthy amictus shawl dependet, hangs, ex humeris, from his shoulders by a nodo, by a knot. Notice, this depiction of Charon here is not exactly flattering. It continues. He subbiget, he drives the ratem, the raft, ipse, himself, with a conto, with a pole, and he ministrat the velis, and he tends to its sails, and subvectat, and ferries corporor, literally bodies, translated here as corpses, but bodies would also make sense, in his ferruginea iron red kimber craft, possibly written as kumba. Yam senior, already old, said, but senectus, old age, for a deo, for a god, is cruda and viridis, is fresh and lively, literally green. So contrast here of the boat to the green old age. This is very much an image of a kind of rough old man driving a rusty craft. Later on we get the fact that it's kind of patchy and full of holes. He's got this massive great beard on him that's just kind of rough and unshaven. It's not a flattering image of Charon. It's not necessarily the skeletal image that we get sometimes in modern literature, but it is definitely very evocative of a particular image in one's head. Continuing, omnis turba, all the crowd, effusa, literally having been poured out, but streaming, ad repas, to the banks, ruebat hook, was rushing here. Then we get a list of what all the crowd is. Matres atque viri, mothers and men, que corpora, and the bodies, defuncta, finished with vita, with life, of magnaminum, of great-souled heroum, heroes, and pueri, boys, and innuptae, and unmarried puellae, girls, and juvenes, and young men, impositi, laid upon rogis, funeral pyres, ante ora, before the faces parentum, before the faces of their parents. Huge list of all types of people, trying to give us an impression that this isn't just a few different types of people, this is everyone. Everyone comes to this river, from children to old men to heroes to just randomers. Everyone comes here. Quam multa, as many as. This is the start of a simile. Epic similes, technical term, like this are probably going to be one of the more important sections to learn because examiners love to use them for analysis type questions because they're very easy to analyze. They're very, very, very common in this type of literature. Virgil is heavily borrowing from the works of Homer, who, quote unquote, wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, which, again, hugely important works. And they are also full of similes. In theory, these are to help the reader understand otherwise really difficult concepts. So in this one, Virgil, as you can see in the translation, is talking about as many as leaves that fall, or as many as the birds that fly. It's something that the reader can visualize and see, but also we can take real deep analysis into why he's chosen these particular things to compare to. So, quam multa, as many as the folia, the leaves, lapsa. Lapsa literally means slipped. I've translated it here as withered. Withered leaves that cadunt, that fall in silvis, in the trees, in autumni, autumn's frigore primo first, frigore thrust or cold. Out, or quam multae, as many as the aves, the birds, that glomeranter, that flock ad terram, to the land, ab ulto, from the deep, gurgite, ocean. You may have noticed that gurgite I translated in line 295 to mean whirlpool, and now I'm just translating it as ocean. I will try to stick to the same meaning of a word if possible, but often not possible in poetry. Sorry. Ubi frigidus annus, when literally the cold year, but either translate that as cold season or the cold of the year, i.e. winter. Fugat drives them trans pontum, across the sea, and immitit sends them to apricis terris, to sunny lands. Notice where we get the word apricot from, because they are sunny. The Romans didn't really understand where birds went when they migrated. They noticed that they did, but they didn't really know where they went. So think about why Virgil might be choosing to compare all of these people on the shores of the river Styx trying to get across to leaves that fall and birds that fly. Leaves fall randomly. Is it tragic? Is it not? Birds seem to fly randomly, particularly to the Romans, but actually they're trying to go to sunnier lands. Are the people trying to get across to sunnier lands? Who knows? Stabant, they were standing, orantes, begging, that primi, they might be first transmittere to cross the cursum, the course. And they were tendebanting, they were holding out their manus, their hands. That one is fourth declension accusative plural. In amore, in longing of the ulterioris ripae, of the far bank. Said, but the tristis navita, but the gloomy sailor or boatman. He accipit nunc hos, he accepts now these, nunc illos, now those. Ast, but arcet, wards off, alios, others, longe, far, sumotos, driven off from the harena, from the sand. One commentary I've seen is like pushed far away, i.e. he's like pushing them off with his long pole, as you can kind of see here. So, obvious question, why is he accepting some people but not other people? Well, okay, so sources kind of differ on what you need to do to get onto Charon's boat to get across the river. Some really, really early versions, and weirdly enough, really, really late Christian versions, have Charon specifically hurrying people up to get them onto his boat. In a few instances, literally beating them with the stick in order to get them to move faster. However, somewhere around 4th to 6th centuries BC, it seems to become quite a popular idea that you needed to pay him to obols, you can see here. These were lower value silver coins. Specifically, we actually have some Charon's obols, which are pseudo coins, which are a bit thin and don't have all the details of real coins that they would be using in burial sites. They may have even been in the mouth, but that's not exactly a hard and fast rule. Other versions say that you just needed to have a proper funeral. What a proper funeral is varies. In the Aeneid, we're going with that version. So the Sibyl, the prophetess that's leading Aeneas, says, all this crowd you see were destitute and unburied. That ferryman is Charon, those who the waves carry were buried. He may not carry them from the fearful shore on the harsh waters before their bones are at rest on the earth. They need to roam for 100 years. So, if you don't get a proper burial, you have to just stand there on the shores, being bored and whatevering, until your time is up. Kind of almost like a little weird version of purgatory, but not really. So there you have all of section 1, lines 295 to 316. As you can see here, I've tried to make it more distinct as to see what chunks are. Very, very descriptive writing of the shores of Acheron, like what it looks like, and then of Charon and his job. We haven't actually got any of the main action, so to speak, with Aeneas yet whatsoever. We're just setting up the scene, but really nice section to get if we get analyses, questions, because obviously lots and lots to pick out in terms of choice of word and of imagery. In general, the verse literature is slightly harder to learn because the vocabulary is more unusual. The grammar isn't terrible here, but often is quite separated. But loads and loads and loads to analyze if you can learn what the vocabulary means. Hope that helps. Thank you very much.